Veterans, leaders, changemakers, welcome to part 2 of the Hidden Bridge series, where we're about to uncover a truth that's been hiding in plain sight for over 50 years. I'm your host, Adam Peters, and today I'm joined by Matt Lasher and Thomas McKenzie. Thomas was here last week. We're going to get to Matt's story here in a second, but we're going to dive deep into where the transition challenge truly begins today. The moment a young American first considers putting on the uniform. Matt is a 20-year Marine Corps veteran who served as a regional executive recruiting trainer overseeing recruitment operations across 10 states. His current research examines how the fundamental assumptions of all volunteer force established in 1973 impact today's military transition challenges. What's going to make this episode different is that we're not just identifying problems. We're going to expose the systemic roots of transition challenges that begin long before anyone thinks about leaving the service. This conversation is going to challenge everything that you thought you know about the transition, everything that they're trying to teach you about the transition. This is going to be a conversation that you're not going to hear anywhere else with three guys who have very thick opinions on this stuff because we deal with it every day. So as we work towards our mission of reaching 1 million veterans before I turn 40 on May 9th, 2025, this episode could very well be the catalyst that helps us understand why traditional transition programs start far too late. So let's dive in. Thomas, Matt, man, I'm so glad to have you guys here. I'm so pumped to do this. Let's just jump right in. Matt, let's just get the first question that I always ask new guests out of the way. Where did you grow up and what inspired you to join the Marine Corps?
Thanks, Adam. Upstate New York. Living in a below the poverty line household, not a lot of opportunity in the area that I grew up. My father and my grandfather worked in a factory, and I was a C student. And I saw my prospects for an early college ride there to not really a probable thing because I didn't think I was going to make it. Bumped into a recruiter in school. Some of my friends had made some decisions along that line, and that influenced me pretty dramatically to make the move. I'm one of those rare instances where I didn't have any family members that were serving in the military or had served, at least in my immediate family. And I just through some good friends and some family members or some of their family members that was able to influence me. And then the recruiter course helped that process along pretty dramatically. And that's why I ended up enlisting in the Marine Corps.
Nice, brother. So just give us a highlight reel of your career real quick, and then we'll jump right into what we're really here to talk about, and that's the transition and how shitty it actually is to all of us out there and what a disservice it actually is.
Yeah, so I'm going to be really quick, not super glorious. 20-year Marine Corps career, retired as an E8. Spent about 10 years of my time working in communications, more on the technical side, so repair work, that sort of thing. Ended up being a technician. Got involuntarily pushed out to recruiting duty, like most of my contemporaries that go out on recruiting duty. Ended up getting out there during the 07-08 surge, the George W. Bush surges, and ended up staying out there until I retired in 2016. So since 2016, I worked as an executive director of a World War II charity in San Francisco. I joined Tom at a company we worked together servicing veterans, and I'm here now. Tom and I are working our own things and with Endure by Faith, one of our companies, and also Veteran Services United, a company that helps people with getting their VA disability. Did I lose you?
I think he went. I think he went silent, but we're still here.
Okay. Well, what do you want to do, Tom? You want to? Oh, we lost Adam.
Well, now it's just us live, so I guess we just keep rolling, and we'll probably give him a minute here to hop back on. There he is. Looks like he's connecting. It's got to be that East Coast Wi-Fi.
That's exactly what it is. That East Coast Wi-Fi just shit out on me.
Yeah.
What is going on here? You guys continue. I'll figure this out. Ignore me. You can handle it. I trust you.
Yeah, we won't ignore you. I mean, we're here for you, Adam. So we got to take the time. Let's take the time.
Yeah, want me to talk a little bit about my struggles in transition? We could probably gap that here, and then I can turn it over to Tom, and you can guide it. How does that sound?
Absolutely.
Yeah, let's do it.
So my contemporaries, my peer group, were a little younger than me, and so a lot of the folks that I was really close with as a veteran, we have our little tight internal veteran community. Those folks retired in the last couple of years. So a lot of my good friends from service are now out of service. But I retired in 2016, one of the first guys of my group. And I kind of went out all by my own. And I think one of the things that a lot of people don't place enough emphasis or or we often take for granted the things that we do have. And one thing the military does a really great job of doing is providing a sense of community with your friends groups and things of that nature. And I feel like when I left service in 2016, I really lost like my friends community, going from 18 to 30, 38, all my friends pretty much were service members and partners that I've met in the uniform. And that was my struggle. So psychologically, rebounding from that, kind of building a new circle, waiting for my good friends to leave. Because when you're on the other side, you're a veteran. You don't want to bother the person still wearing the uniform. There's something about that. Like, you don't want to be the guy that's calling, "Hey buddy, how's it going? What are you up to?" You want to kind of let people make, move through their own life and transition, and then you can circle back later. And that's kind of what I did. As soon as my good friends started retiring, like Tom and Danny and a few other folks, really ended up, reaching back out and getting together and talking. And that, I would say that's helped me, I'm 47 now. So these last couple of years have been really great years for me.
Nice.
Yeah. So here's the weird thing, Adam. I'm just going to tell this story. So Matt was kind of like, even though I was like senior to him, like with time on recruiting duty, I was junior to him in rank, way junior to him in age because I just turned 40. And that's not a shot, Matt, I promise. But the reality is like Matt was kind of one of the guys that I looked up to as we all do as service members, trying to find the positive male role model that has kind of run the rabbit for you a bit to kind of offer experience just in general. And so when Matt, I ended up retiring, I don't think I had talked to him for about 6 or 7 years. And, for me, I kind of felt while I was in uniform, probably didn't come to the forefront of my brain outside of he's probably out there busy, crushing life and enjoying the fruits of being retired. And it wasn't until years later that we reconnected at a San Francisco Giants game of all things that we really dug into the realities of his transition and what he was going through. And so I think as we kind of get ready to talk about transition, we talk about what we have, what all of us have experienced and what 250,000 people a year experience. I think it's pretty important that we are just as authentic as we can with what that experience is. Because for far too long, I truly believe that service members have just suffered in silence and not trying to take on the victim mentality, because that's the last thing in the world that I want to do. But there are some honest and hard truths that have to be spoken in this context to try and awaken the force as to what is to come so that it can be prevented. And it's no different than, going through a hot wash, after an op to talk through about what this is. So I think we're going to treat this thing hopefully as like the transition hot wash of just reality, so we can open up everybody's eyes. And so, Adam, what I kind of want to lean into, if you're okay with, just so that I know that Matt has an understanding and the audience has an understanding, can we talk about what your transition was like, and talk a little bit about what Matt's transition was like? Because I know we told mine last week, but and I had a way better road than both of you. But if you wouldn't mind talking through your transition and what that was like for you and what you experienced, I think that's probably a really good starting point for us.
Yeah, man. So I think I had kind of a unique transition because I went through the med board process. So my career was ended prematurely. This should have been the year that I retired. So I would have been at 22 this year in June. That was the original plan, go to 22. So, I have a shoulder surgery after Afghanistan. That didn't do so well. Ended up tearing it again as soon as I got cleared to go back. Trying to be an idiot, keeping up with the young kids doing pull-ups. And so another surgery, specific instructions. The physical therapist ignored the surgeon's instructions and basically ended my career right there on the spot after I had the second surgery. So now what happened to me in the Army is when you're no longer, fit for duty or the role that you're in. I was a platoon sergeant at the time. They want to get you off the MTO as fast as possible. So they kicked me over to range control and they completely outcasted me. This is going to be relevant when Thomas in the future is going to talk about some things on how to destroy a human being. And this is the isolation part. So now I'm away from my unit. My guys just woke up one day and now I'm in the med board process and I'm going through this. and nobody's giving me any guidance. I have no instruction whatsoever. I have basically left to my own devices, hey, figure this shit out on your own. And back in 2015, the med board process was so disorganized and was taking forever because there were so many of us going through it. So there wasn't really anywhere to go for a resource to get the help to figure out what you're supposed to do. So, I'm just basically sitting around for 18 months, waiting for the paperwork to come back and kind of doing random appointments here. And then the day comes and it's very kind of lackluster, man. It's like you go to Waller Hall and you pick up your D214 and your flag that's in a box and your retirement certificate, and they say bye. And I didn't do any ACAP or anything like. I went to one ACAP class. It's all they required me to go to. That's the resume class. So I can't really speak to the ACAP process, though I'm sure it's still not great just from talking to veterans. So I had no preparation. Nobody talked to me about planning. And like the only thing that's on my mind is what they keep telling you in the resume class, and I'm sure throughout the rest of TAP, is use your GI Bill, go to school, get a degree. So for me, and having the perspective that I have now on the transition, that's kind of like a segue into a false transition because I get out, I'm poor because deployed every other year. I'm not saving money because I don't know if I'm coming home alive. I'm going to live my life. And then my career prematurely ends, the paycheck stops, and it's like a month or two before VA money kicks in. You guys should both be familiar with that. And so now it's like, what do I do for these 2 months? Like really having to count my pennies. Adding to that, I have no structure in my life. Nobody's telling me where to be, when to be there, how to do it, zero schedule whatsoever. And then you add to that, like what Matt was just talking about, all of my friends, when I was in Washington at Fort Lewis, I had largely gotten away from the military. Friends kind of outside. I was trying to separate kind of who I was outside of the military from being in uniform. And so most of my friends are civilians, and my very best friend still lives up there to this day. And you don't have anybody to go hang out with because you're 30 years old and everybody else is being an adult working to pay the bills. You're just sitting in your apartment left to your own devices. And so, I did the thing 3 months right out of, I retired in November, and by April I was in college. But for that 4 months, I was just trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do with my GI Bill? Like, because that's what they told me to do, is use your GI Bill. So this is why I call it a false transition. And I've identified several things. We all agree on these things: identity, purpose, community, yada, yada. You need to sit with yourself and figure those things out in transition. But the false transition comes in with you now have a new mission. The mission is to get the degree, right? And then your mission after that is to get the corporate job, and then you're quote unquote successful. And so for 4 years, I had a new mission. It's go to school and get good grades and get the degree. So I would say my transition didn't really start until 4 years after. What I did have to deal with in that transition was I'm a 30-year-old male with more life experience than anybody else in my peer group. I'm going to college with, in Washington has a great program for their high school students called Running Start. So 16, 17-year-olds are getting an associate's degree and a high school diploma at the same time. So now I'm in flight school thinking I'm living my dream. I'm disciplined, so I'm getting work done. I'm where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there, because now I have the structure again. Classes at 6 a.m. This is your flight every single day. Hang out in the ops room. You can get cancellation flights to get through this faster. So, of course, I take advantage of that. So I've got some kind of normalcy going on there. But what's not normal is my peers, because they're young. They have no life experience. And they just look at me like I'm being gifted going through flight school because the Army's paying for it. And so I would have to deal with that stuff. The shots, well, at least you don't have to pay for this. And it's like, hey, you bitch, like, I did pay for this. I paid for this more than you'll ever fucking know. You know what I mean? And so that's really kind of the initial part of my transition. It wouldn't get bad for me until I finished college and I enter the corporate world of insurance. And when I found out how disgusting and scummy people can really be, how they really don't have any ambition to teach you, you're just a number to them and somebody else to sell and make, the bottom line and this, that, and the other. And you don't relate to those people because they're scummy people making a lot of money. They've been doing it 4 or 5 years. You're the new guy. You're older. You're supposed to have experience, but you don't know how to sell anything because your job was to shoot people in the face, not sell them something. So I'm like confused, right? Like I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. And I don't have any resources to go to of anybody to talk to. I have no mentors or no nothing. And I think that's where I went really wrong is I thought that I could figure it all out on my own. And to my detriment, it just slides you further into that transition hole.
Well, and that's the thing that you say right there, Adam, is you think that you can figure it out on your own because there were so many times that you thought you did that while you were in uniform, but you had like a group of human beings that were behind you to kind of vet those decisions. And that's one of the untold truths that don't necessarily come out until you start going through it. Is this is the first time that you truly, truly, truly are on your own. And they're your decisions only affected by you. And if you don't have a strong tribe that's alongside you, it can feel like, you can feel like you were just almost abandoned. And it's the first time ever that you are truly, truly disconnected.
Well, 100%. And I like to say too, I joined the Army at 17. I got out at 30. I never learned how to be a real adult, right? If you really think about that statement, the Army takes care of your food. The Army takes care of your medicine. The Army takes care of your insurance. The Army takes care of your housing. Now you're left to figure all of that out on your own. So do you know what the difference between a copay and co-insurance and all of that is? Do you know what it is to not just go to sick call, but to have to make an appointment with your PCM? Because I had to figure that out all the hard way, right? So you're speaking to exactly how I was feeling. It's like, I don't know how to be an adult because the Army didn't teach me.
Right. And that's the, the thing that a buddy of mine says all the time. It's like when you join the service, in a lot of cases, you're trading your actual birth parents for a second set of parents. That second set of parents, they're probably going to be scarier. They're probably going to be, a little bit more fun to deal with from time to time. But they provide absolutely everything. In some cases, they're going to be 100% more abusive as well. But the reality is that for a lot of us that have, joined at a very, very early age, although we think we've got it all figured out, you don't know what you don't know. And so when that stuff starts to hit you like a ton of bricks and you realize you're maybe not as equipped or as sharp as you once thought because you are no longer a master of that contained environment, it is a really, really scary and humbling moment. And I think that's when a lot of like service members go internal. So look, we got your transition. You had one class through ACAP or one course through TAP, the resume class. That does suck. I want to kind of transition over to Matt's experience and then open it up to the audience as well. And maybe I'll pose this to the audience first. Like for our audience that is out there, watching on live stream, if you wouldn't mind typing your answers in, we just love to get a list. But I want you to list out absolutely everything that has to happen in order for you to successfully transition out of the military. So if you guys can start coming up with your list, and we're going to reference that and talk to that. But Matt, transition over to you to just, talk about what your transition experience was like, because I know it was unique from mine and unique from Adam's as well.
Yeah, I did a regular retirement, Adam. So I did, but I was broke. And Tom was broke too, physically broke. I was doing my last CFT and I was fire carrying. I don't know, the Marine Corps does like a CFT one half of the year and a PFT the other half. The combat fitness test is in camis and your fireman's carry and some other stuff like that. For those out there who are not indoctrinated with that, I collapsed. Like I have a really bad lower back and I had pinched a nerve carrying my commanding officer down at the district. So it was my last duty station. I collapsed, absolutely embarrassed. I've never been a physical specimen, but I've always kind of prided myself in being strong, fast, and at least I compete. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is a young man's game. I think this is it. I don't think I can go much further. And I was up against orders. I had about a year left in that duty station, and I kind of had to make the choice. And that was made the choice for me. I was like hunching over my desk. I was struggling to walk around. Those stupid chloroform plastic shoes they make you wear are uncomfortable. They're not good for your posture. So I just had posture issues, leg, knee issues. So I decided I was going to leave. I really had an intent on retiring right then and there, but physically I couldn't do it anymore. And that was it. So we call it filing an Appendix J, which is just kind of filing your paperwork to get the process going. You get your date, you're at your last day active duty, and then you reverse engineer all that. Your terminal leave, your permissive TAD. I pretty much stayed working until the last 2 months. And it was like, even that was a challenge, negotiating that with my officer in charge at the time. He was like, I was on the road traveling a lot, doing inspections, and he didn't want to let me go. And so I had to negotiate time away so I could get ready to move my family and stuff like that. But I did my TAPS like 6 months before I got out of the military. And let me tell you, what an absolute utter waste of resources it is to put somebody through something like that 6 months out. Maybe that's a great time to introduce you to some of these topics, but it is not the end all be all. And you need to get information when you're ready to receive it. And when you're at that phase of separation, you don't know what you don't know. Like kind of like what you said earlier about what were you talking about? The the copays and healthcare and insurance and all this jazz that you need to know. I learned all that like the hard way through like TRICARE and all this other stuff. And I'm like, man, I wish I had, in my mind, I'm like, I wish I had paid more attention. But the reality of it is, it just wasn't delivered at an optimal time. And God bless the ladies the guys and gals that put on the TAPS classes. This isn't a shot against them, but they're just trying to check box. They're on a checklist, and they're just trying to, okay, this dude's good, just like making sausage. Let's get them through the process, get them out the door, and they're just gonna have to figure it out on their own, which is the absolute wrong approach, because then you got to pick up the pieces along with the VA, and that's a disaster all on its own. But really wasn't prepared, man. Like I was working about 2 months out. Family really didn't have a plan. We kind of had an idea where we wanted to live. We had an idea of what I was going to do. I was applying for jobs. My resume kind of sucked, but I was lucky smart enough to have a mentor on the civilian side to help me with my resume. So I did have some things that I was doing, but ultimately, it wasn't enough. I got lucky to be hired at as the executive director of a charity in San Francisco. I would call that luck. More than anything. I mean, I was very lucky to get that job, and that job kind of, taught me. It was a soft landing for me, really, and allowed me. And my wife's family lives in the Bay Area, so that was a blessing. They were able to help us out with the 2 kids and the dogs and the house and whatnot. But it was a rolling disaster. And as soon as you say you're going to file your Appendix J, to your point, Adam, same thing in the Marine Corps. The command is kind of starting to count you out. Maybe they're not going to move you out of a unit, but they're gonna, you're gonna get pushed over to the side here, and you kind of removed from how the cheese is made, right? And that feels a certain kind of way. Especially if you're at that level where you're retiring, you've been an integral part of everything that's been done around you. You've always been a very important cog in the machine that is the military. And all of a sudden, they're just gonna take the pliers out and pull the cog out, and that cog feels a certain kind of way about being pulled out of the machine. And I did too. And I wasn't really ready to reconcile what those feelings were. I didn't really know what that was, but I dreamed about it. I had kind of like these nightmares about it. I remember really reflecting on it, and unpacking all that was an important part of my transition. And like I said earlier, I didn't have friends. So I kind of felt like I didn't want to bother my active duty buddies. And I sort of had to look at myself in the mirror, and, pick those pieces apart a little by little. And I luckily I have a wonderful family, wife, support system, and I know a lot of people don't have that. And that, ultimately, that got me here. But I know a lot of folks don't have those things, and I probably pulled some good cards out of the deck. But I shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to pull, a luck. We shouldn't have to have these, Hail Mary type situations when you leave service. But anyways, I'll stop talking here.
No, look, we could keep talking all day. That's what we're here to do. And we've got a couple of comments that are in here, so my eyes are going to shift as I read them.
Yeah, go for it.
And so, look, LinkedIn user, it means that we're not connected if I can't see you here. But here's what they came up with. File for the VA 180 days prior, right? So that's the BDD claim that they talk about. You got to go to dental. You got to go to medical. Maybe you're going to go through the process of finding a skill bridge if you're allowed. Maybe you're in the process of moving somewhere else. So you got to figure that out. You got to find a house, figure out where you're going to be for, how you're going to pay for utilities. And you got to find a new job. And in most cases, service members don't want to keep doing the same thing that they have, or they can't, because you can't kill bad guys as a job in the civilian sector. Updating your driver's license, trying to figure out, what you're going to do for life insurance if you're an old guy like the three of us here, going through that 5 days of TAP, and then being told over and over and over again that the world is yours and just go out there and get it. And you can do one of three things: go get an education, you can go get a job, or you can go become an entrepreneur. And it's just that simple. So LinkedIn user, we're not connected. We should be connected, because appreciate you giving that feedback. And then
Carlos also, we left out a big part of this, and I think it's important. CFI is a big thing. They got me for like $1,400 for some equipment that I had been issued in 2003 that was obsolete, that they didn't take from other people. Now it's on I forget what we call it in the Army, but some kind of charge statement. And I've got to go drive around, spend money I don't have to replace equipment that they're just going to throw away. Like that's a huge barrier that I think people are missing out on, because you can damn sure expect that you're not going to have. I've never seen anybody in my 13-year career go through CFI and get a first-time go ever. So I think that's important to touch on too. Like, that's very real. You guys be prepared to spend some money. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're dead on there. And I'm going to go to Carlos Rios, right? And I worked with Carlos, probably about 8-9 months ago. And Carlos, if I'm getting my time frame wrong, I'm really sorry, but the transition should begin at 24 months, right? Dropping the Appendix J 18 months out, financial preparation, medical records, VA disability benefits, family preparation, job search. But look, here's the reality. You're not a very good teammate if you're doing all those things internally. And what people don't really understand or don't really get is that in order for the military, in order for the different branches of service to be successful and to accomplish its mission, it requires 100% selfless sacrifice every single day. And so those folks out there that are really well prepared for the transition, just Tom McKenzie's opinion, they're probably not the teammates that I really want. They're probably not the folks that I want to serve with, because they're not the same selfless human beings that exist. And so when we really break into transition, and this is what I've shared with a couple of places where I've been a keynote speaker, and I'm breaking it down for corporate entities to understand what they can do to help service members. I ask them that question: what does it mean to actually transition? When somebody gets out of the military, what do they have to do? And the reality is they don't know. They have no clue. But when I start breaking down all these problems, like, and I'll use this example. I've used this several times with organizations I've spoken at. But could you imagine you're a civilian at a job, and in 24 months, this is not the job for you, and that you don't want to be there. But they're going to expect you to invest every bit of your being to be the best employee that you possibly can. And on top of that, you're going to let them know 6 to 12 months out that you're no longer going to be there when that time frame comes. And what is the return that the corporate leadership is going to put on you? Well, we're going to expect more, and we're going to expect you to put forth the same amount of effort. And your focus is going to be on making this company and this organization go better. And we're not going to give you time to search for another job. We're not going to give you time to go educate yourself. We're not going to give you time to make these preparations for your family. In fact, I'm going to go out of my way to make sure that you get 90 days of the vacation you saved up to figure out all those things. And that is the problem. And look, I am the number one offender of this, because I was a recruiting instructor who only cared about making sure that the accession mission was met month in and month out. And there are like 5 recruiters that I have prophetically apologized to in my time when I could have affected that for them, but I didn't know what I didn't know. And Matt and I discussed this just earlier this week. We've got guys like the Simon Sinek's of the world that have made a ton of money taking the leadership lessons that we have talked about and what makes us successful in war and in peace, and in preparation for war and peace, and gone out and sold this to corporate entities that this is the way that you should lead. Well, he missed an opportunity here, because the honest to God truth is, the second you say that you don't want to be part of the club, or you physically can't be part of the club anymore, all those lessons go out, and we're going to milk you for everything that you're worth. And I'm sure that there are some really good commanders out there, some really good senior enlisted that are trying to do right. but most of them, because they haven't experienced it for themselves, really are going to hold their people and prevent them from seeking opportunities that are going to put them into a different category. So I think this is probably the best time that, Matt, if you wouldn't mind, let's pop up our chart just so we can show everybody the chart. Right.
Yeah. So can I say something really quick about the value of a veteran in society?
Yes.
When I thought, me and Tom talked about starting a podcast and with reflecting for this show, one of the things we as veterans got to do a good job of is start appealing to people who don't have those experiences, and talking in ways that the average human being that isn't indoctrinated with the uniform can understand the situation. And we hear a lot of things, and I can tell you just about every veteran I know hears "Thank you for your service." It's a cringy. You internalize that, and it's like this gross feeling of like Merry Christmas or good. It's like a greeting where there's some good, honest intention behind it, but it's not really an authentic. Like, you don't really care. You're just saying it because you heard I was a veteran, and that's a nice thing to say to me.
Yeah,
and that's fine. But I'm going to lay the case out. So one of the things I learned, I spent 7 years after I retired working for a World War II charity. And one of the things that I really picked up on, one of the lessons I learned from that time there was World War II wasn't won by the service members who fought in World War II. That war was won by the veterans who fought in World War I. Those folks who served in World War I and saw that the absolute devastation, the Spanish flu, the trench warfare, the supply chain, logistical issues, those veterans were in places of leadership when World War II came around. And so across all private and public spaces, those individuals were the things those individuals in those positions allowed us to create the private and public partnerships across our country that allowed us to make this machine that we put together as a country, both manufacturing and logistics, to win wars in two fronts. And a lot of people point to these great leaders like General Patton, they'll point to Eisenhower, all these folks that we know so much about in history, and not really understand the substrate of how that war was really won. It was won by the retired, the separated veteran who palpably understands war. And that's where you can't replace that with the bureaucrat. You can't replace that with the storytelling by Simon Smith. Not to crap on that dude. I think he's a very talented storyteller. I just don't like it when you have an opportunity to tell a story, you should let the person tell their story and not tell it for them. I've always believed that, because there's something missed in translation when you're trying to replicate something that you didn't experience. And anyways, so very, very important. And throughout our history, that relationship, that veteran relationship to war is very, very important. Just as important as a uniformed service member relationship to war. In that perspective, it prepares us, it readies us, and it keeps us out of wars we don't need to be in, because we know the costs.
Yeah.
And I put this slide together not to kind of PowerPoint people or anything like that, but I want to talk about our situation as a country, how this all is the cyclical impact. Me and Tom have spent a lot of time recruiting. Both of us have over a decade of recruiting experience. And we also have a lot of time working with veterans after they transition. So we kind of have this unique perspective. And I drew these lines in between the recruiting process and the veteran side, because the military itself, the DoD, does not like dealing with recruiting. It hates it. It doesn't like it. It wants it to go away. It wants the problem to be gone. And it doesn't like dealing with veterans. And so our experience in transition is just as much a result as sort of like the DoD not really wanting to deal with it, just like they don't want to deal with recruiting. Recruiting is a place they send people, they force people to go out there. The culture doesn't like it. It doesn't accept it. Everybody who's ever been in uniform is trying to dodge recruiting duty. They don't want to be part of it. They try their best. And that's because the culture itself teaches us not to like it, because it's not a primary function of the military. And so one of the things that's really going on, and we and Tom have talked pretty deeply about this, is that the number of people who have served in uniform, it's declining at a rapid rate. 1968, we had 3.5 million people in uniform. That's declined to 2022, where we have 1.3, and it's going lower. I don't know what the numbers are this year, but it's probably dropping even further. So we're slowly ramping down. And 1973 is the year we implemented the all-volunteer force. So that's where the Gates Commission came out, and President Nixon implemented the all-volunteer force, and we've been on kind of a slide in terms of our manpower. So we're missing recruiting missions that are lowering year over year. So we're missing these missions. We're not making them, and we're moving the target. The goalposts are constantly moving, and we're collapsing units. We're consolidating. We're on the back end changing our missions and how we fight wars. Yes, there's reasons why we need less uniformed people. We have technology. We have tools that we didn't have in 1973. But also, you're talking about a third of what we had then. And yes, the Cold War ended. But
looking at these numbers, Matt,
yeah.
there's one on here that's terrifying to me.
Yes.
71% of Americans aged 17 to 24 ineligible for the military.
Yep.
That is terrifying to me.
Yeah, that's not me. That's not me coming up with that number. That's reported by the Pentagon. So, and let me massage that a bit more. So what that really says is 29% of the U.S. population in that age group can join without a waiver, right? So these 71%, some of them have waiverable conditions depending on the state of the military, and some of them don't. So what the real eligibility number is, we really don't know what it is, because the military doesn't want to parse that out. They don't want to say, hey,
of course not. Why would you parse that out? That's an alarming fucking number, right? Like 71, you're talking about 3/4 of Americans are ineligible without a waiver to join military service.
100%.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, it's brutal. And me and Tom, we know this is evolution. This is evolving as we go. MEPS is a disaster. MEPS is a bureaucratic machine that, again, the individual people who work out there, I don't want to crap on those folks. They do a great job, but it is not functional as a tool to assess people into the military. It sucks. It's garbage. They've been trying to get away from it. They can't, because there's nobody in a position of strategic leadership to make the right decisions. The number that troubles me even more, and this is the correlation that I want to make with this chart, is so between 70 and 80% of the people who join the military right now have an immediate family member that has served. And if you look to the right, our veteran population is in rapid decline. So our last draftee in Vietnam was drafted in 1973. That individual, if you do the math, it's been 52 years. So if that individual joined when they were 18 years old, right, that person is now 70 years old. So that cohort of conscripted people they're moving on at a pretty cyclic rate right now, because you're getting to that age where mortality is a real thing. And so right now, going from 1980 to 1980 to 2022, we've basically divided by 3 our veteran population society. If you look at Congress in the 1950s, we had something like 80% of Congress people were military, were veterans. Now it's down to like, I think, 15%. It's shrunk pretty dramatically. They're projecting, if all things stay the same, that by 2048 we're going to have about 3% of the American population is going to have service. And I'm not talking about campaign medals and going to war. I'm talking about just wearing a uniform. And that correlation between our population's willingness to serve really relates to knowing somebody who is in the military. And if we are losing the people who have experience in the military, it's just going to continue to make that recruiting problem far, far worse. Now, I'm going to drop a fact here, and I'm going to let you guys kind of give your guys' take on this. Last year's NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, removed the requirement for you to register for the selective service. So if you're a young person, like I was when I was 18, I turned 18, and I had to go down to the post. My parents took me down to the post office to register with a selective service, because back then that was the one reminder you had that you had a civic duty to your country. Now, what we've done as a society is we said we're going to strip that out. Right? We're going to strip out that one reminder young people get that they have a civic obligation if something were to happen. And then you look at this chart and you say, well, wait a minute. What happens if this doesn't turn around or change and we have a war with a peer aggressor, right? Like a Russia or a China? What happens? And so I don't know, honestly, how that's going to look. And young people, are they going to be, accepting of this obligation that they don't really, some of them don't really know much about, because I don't think you hear much of it in society these days. At least I don't. And I have 2 young kids here, and I'm thinking about this from what I know in the military, kind of how I know the veteran situation. I'm putting these pieces together, and I'm like, man alive, So to kind of bring this back to the veteran point, it is absolutely important. It's a national imperative. It's a national security issue that the veterans that do exist in society right now must be successful. They must elevate. They must become excellent in their craft. They must rise, because when the nation gets into trouble, and it will, it always has, those are the people who are going to be behind the machinery, making things work in time of war. And we can't afford for that 3% in 2048 to be sitting on their couch or not contributing to society. They need to be implemented. They need to be decision makers. They need to be very successful and healthy. And so, like Adam, that's kind of the full circle conversation, is talking about transition and fixing this problem. It's not just, hey, we want to take care of individual veterans because they're good people, they're our people. This is, I'm going to be 70 one day, and we might be at war, and I want this thing to survive me for my kids. And whether we like war or not, veterans are an important, integral part of what keeps us safe. And we're letting this thing run away quickly. And I don't know how it's fixed. I can tell you, Tom and I talked a little bit earlier, the bureaucracy at the Department of Defense it's trash, it's garbage. Those people don't know what they're doing. There's no one there with the knowledge and experience to run a serious national strategy change for recruiting. It's time to get the recruiting centers out of strip malls. Nobody goes to strip malls anymore. They don't, that's not a center of industry anymore in the world we live in. We own Amazon. We everything's electronic. We have the internet. We have smartphones. We have to reach out to young people where they are, not where we want them to be. And it's like a reflection of our lack of this, the degeneration of our strategy. And in 1973, it made a lot of sense, but today it's not, and it's reflective in the numbers. And our services aren't being honest about the ramifications of this if it goes south. I'm very concerned because, like I said, I got kids, and I don't want to see, them to get told. I like them to volunteer. I don't want them to get pushed into it. So we were talking earlier about having bad troops or Marines in your charge. Mm-hmm. Imagine somebody being told they have to be there and how bad that would be.
This is kind of an unpopular opinion, Matt, but I really am kind of for conscription. I think that that's a powerful. I know what the Army opened up for me. I know that I'm here advocating for change in the transition to make things better. Yeah. But I also know that the opportunities that the Army provided for me, they got me out of small town America because I knew there was a larger world out there and I didn't want to work on a farm or whatever. I also, when I was in college, I really latched onto this idea that conscription could be great for everybody in society, because you're going to get life experience out of this. You're going to learn some things. You're going to figure out who you are internally and what challenges you can handle. You're going to be able to manage stress better. Also, you're going to be more disciplined to then go to college and not party away 4 years of college, but actually be ahead of your work. That's one of the questions I got when I was in college, was like, how are you done with this week's work already? And it's like, because I value my time. I have discipline. So let me just get this work done Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I don't have shit to do for the next 4 days. And I like that. That's great for me, because 4-day weekends in the Army, they didn't come very often. You know what I mean? So it's an unpopular opinion, but I really do think that the entire country would benefit from conscription. And it really breaks my heart that we've gotten rid of the selective service. I did not know that, and I probably should, but that's a tragedy.
Well, we didn't get rid of the selective service. We made registration not a requirement anymore. So the selective service is alive and well. It's the fact that we don't tell anybody about it when they turn 18 like we used to. That's the changes, which is,
well, I mean, you might as well have just gotten rid of it, right? Like, who's going to fill out that? I remember when that card came to my desk in high school. I had already taken the ASVAB and joined the Army, so it was like a moot point. But I remember my peers looking around like, ooh, this is tough. I don't really want to have to sign this, but that's a part of being a citizen of the United States. So that's mind-blowing to me. And Thomas, your thoughts?
Look, I won't go down the road of conscription, but I'm going to put this back on transition, and we'll kick it back over to the recruiting part. And you know what? Let's play into your conscription idea. And for the general public out there, right, that might be watching this, when you hear that word veteran, right, when you hear that word, when you hear veteran or vet, what are the words that come into your mind? And so I'll give you a second to think about that. And some of you might be able to say that it's a leader and a hero and selfless sacrifice and all the things that we know come with intangible service and what we've gone through. But I'm also, when I hear that word veteran, and when I think back to being a 17-year-old kid, I think of Lieutenant Dan with blown off legs, the alcoholic that has PTSD, the exact narrative that's being shared now. And so when we think about what transition is today in 2025 and what it was in 2022, when I transitioned out, again, I had a better deal than most get. But the reality is we are not doing ourselves any favors for the individual, for the individual service member, his family, their families. We're not doing anything for our country, and we are sure as heck not inspiring the next generation of warfighter to come replace us. And I think that's really my point, is that we should want veterans to thrive, and we should want to give them the time, and we should want to connect them to resources, and not necessarily make it easier, but make the process of navigating things a bit easier, because that is what the general public, thinks of veterans. That's what they think of service. And I was watching a video that Matt had sent me earlier with the commanding generals of all the services and the head of that bureaucratic agency up there in a press conference. And really what they're doing now is they are managing their own individual recruiting brands, trying to make this mission come together. And the key takeaway that was briefed in that was that you've got a less propense population to draw from, that they don't see the benefits of military service, and they need to recruit the best and the brightest that are out there. Well, in order to recruit the best and the brightest, you need to showcase the benefits that come from service. You need to showcase that veterans, if given the opportunity, the time, the space, the resources, the investment of their time, that they can go out there and crush it the same way Matt described post-World War I, post-World War II. And so the last time conscription was a thing, Adam, was Vietnam. And that's where I think this veteran narrative really began, was pulling people in that weren't inclined for service. And so again, I kind of agree with you. I think everybody should serve to some capacity, but not necessarily the person in the foxhole that I want to be with. But my key takeaway from this entire conversation is we should want our service members, we should want our Marines, our soldiers, our airmen, our guardians to be successful and kind of return on the promise. You're not owed anything. You got paid on the 1st and the 15th, and medical and dental was taken care of, and you got 3 hots in a cot. You had 30 days of paid vacation. You learned a job. You learned a skill set. You got some leadership experience. You got all those things. You're not a victim. But when it comes to this transition, we need to do better. And it's going to take the collective of service members that have ran this road before to really light that pathway up, and then bring kind of tangible actions that could be, taken and put into effect. And that's just Tom McKenzie's personal opinion, working with the service members that I've worked with over the last 2.5 years. So what I think might be best, Matt, if you're cool with it, is maybe talking a little bit about how these recruiting missions and how these brands are managed, and then talking a little bit about the agency that oversees the strategic value, or the strategic plan, if we want to call it that affects recruiting. Is that something that you're cool with talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say, I think I kind of agree with both of you on the conscription question. I would say that in terms of American culture, I think conscription is good. I think forcing people from all walks of life, because I think volunteer service can target more disproportionately people with certain circumstances. And I think having a more broad, fair approach to service is healthy for our society. But in the force design that we serve in, I think it's very difficult, because we have highly technical people in our service design around technical people. And if you have people there for only 2 years, you don't have time to train them, they don't really want to be there, that creates problems in service. Whereas we're talking, it's which side of the coin do you really want to work on? And that's a question, but it's a question we need to be talking about, because it could be a reality, I think, going forward. But so let me just talk quick about, down to Tom's point here. Strategic leadership is a problem in the military. And it's a problem in the military because of the conventions of promotion that we have in the service. So when you reach a certain level, usually it's from the Marine Corps, E7 to E8 is one level right there. And you have a colonel to the brigadier general. There's a lot more people feeding into a lot less positions. And there becomes kind of like the culture of the institutions select the people who are cut basically from the same cloth. They pick people with the same backgrounds. And that's a problem. We don't have a diversity of thought in our military. A lot of the folks that get promoted all the way up have to have certain roles in their resume, or they don't get it. And the reason why we have this problem is because these peripheral missions, like veterans, recruiting duty in particular, because that's really an active duty mission, we don't really elevate. I know a lot of really good majors and colonels out there who are absolute experts in this world, I would consider them thought leaders almost, but they'll never see the light of day when it comes to the rank of general because they've spent too much time doing this kind of work. And because of that kind of deference to people who have certain skills, when you get to the Department of Defense, you don't have those retired general officers or people to fill those bureaucratic roles to help us reimagine strategy. If you're not an expert in a space and you get in charge of a space that you're not really familiar with, your tendency is to not want to break it. Your tendency is to want to maybe leave your mark, but not do anything to jeopardize it for the next person or be the person caught breaking the toy. Now, if you're a person who's worked in this space for a long time and you're an expert and you're intellectually invested and you get to that point where you can make strategic change, you're chomping at the bit to reimagine that space and make it more of an economical space for your people at the lowest level. And we just don't have that. We don't have these really strong strategic leaders in the Department of Defense who are going to look down on the services and sort of create a national strategy that they have to operate under. The way it works right now is we have an Undersecretary of Defense of Personnel and Policy, and then we have a Director of Acquisition and Personnel Policy. And those two people really run the recruiting mission for the military. And between the two of them, at least last time I checked, I don't know if there's new appointees. You got to check every day these days. You never know who's getting replaced. But they had 4 years of military service between the two of them. And in my mind, I don't care what advanced degree you get or how much studying you've done. If you haven't put the cloth on and spent time, and particularly if you're working in the recruiting world, doing that work, you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. And so the epiphany to me was like, oh, why is MEPS a disaster? Well, it's because the people who are making these strategic calls are just they're asleep at the wheel, or they just don't know what they don't know, which is being gracious. I think they're kind of inept and they probably need to move on. But yeah, my hope is that.
I love. Well, I'm with you, Matt, because I didn't know that an officer out on the recruiting trail is never going to see general, and it's fascinating to me because for my career progression as an infantry Army dude, I had to go to either drill or recruiting for 3 years. Period. End of story. You will not progress in your career without one of those identifiers in your board packet for E7. Period. Right. End of story. Not getting picked up. Doesn't matter how much combat time you have. So it doesn't make sense to me why we would be putting, officers who understand this stuff. Why would they not be climbing the ladder? I mean, I guess it does make sense to me because I see the same things that you see with we're not doing merit-based promotions at all. We're hiring buddies to do a job, creating this fucking hive mind that is now out of fucking control and compromising national security, compromising veteran health on the other side of the transition. And it's disgusting, man. It really makes me fucking mad. It really, like, we're not, it sucks that we struggle so much to enjoy the freedoms we fought for on the other side of our service. And I don't think I think you're right. It's the leadership that's causing these problems.
So it's not that none of them will ever see general. It's because there are some of these generals right now that are in charge of the individual services that do have recruiting experience, but they don't necessarily they weren't grown up in that world. And at least for the Marine Corps, they select some of the best officers to serve at the lowest level of recruiting and lead recruiting stations. And there are some that, really love the experience and they'll move up and they'll take on different billets or different jobs within recruiting. But generally, if they find themselves in this world where they've had multiple assignments in that world, there's not a pathway for them to go in there and lead those recruiting commands and actually affect the strategic outcomes. And so what we see is that you've got some folks, as Matt, had put out there, that maybe have a little bit of experience, but they're finally at this level where they are overseeing the entire organization, and they're not there to make sweeping change. They're there to put their stamp on what they can do to better affect that and take care of their people to a degree, but they don't understand the intimate details of what they could do because they haven't lived it, breathed it, been part of that mission for a decade of their life.
Can I give you an analogy?
Yeah.
So you're an infantry guy, right, Adam?
Yes, sir.
So let's say, for instance, and here's a good example, right? And this is the logic I like to use here. I took let's call him a colonel, right? And the colonel was a administrator for his entire career. And I say, you know what? guess what, buddy? You're not an administrator. You're going to run an infantry regiment. I'm going to put you in charge of infantry regiment. What's going to happen to that? How long is that dude going to last?
Well, it depends on if he's got a good sergeant major or not, but not long.
Right. He's probably not going to be at least not going to be accepted by the people underneath him, and probably isn't going to have the strategic mind that you develop coming from the bottom to the top. Yeah. You need all those sets of experiences to get that knowledge. And that's the problem with recruiting duty is you get infantry people on recruiting duty, or you get administrators on recruiting duty, and then they go back to their primary occupation. And that's just a distraction, right? And so in order to develop a strategic leader, you need to have not only experiences, but you need to be building on those to your career. And that is really why things are kind of suffering, is because, in order to get to that person who can who has the ear of the Secretary of Defense, who can go in and brief a president, to get that person, you need to have all those things underneath him to get to that level, right? And I don't think we have many of those folks. Yes, there are guys out there and gals out there that have the experience, but not enough, and they're not interested, a lot of them. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thomas, so the primary kind of theme for this show was how recruiting impacts the transition. And I know you have some really good thoughts on this based on 16 years as a recruiter out there. So what are the things that recruiters are doing other than what Matt has just mentioned that are contributing to shitty transitions on the other side? And how has all this come together?
Well, there's a couple of parts. And I don't think, I'll tell you right now, the individual recruiter that's out there making it happen, most of them are doing just glorious, amazing work. But we sure do not do ourselves any favors when we don't explain that when we don't understand the hardship that's to come in transition, just in general, because typically we're going to paint, it's not this garden of roses, but it's like we have that fallacy that if somebody joins and they go through the process, that on the backside that they're going to be okay. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? It's a hard thing. It's an individual thing. And it takes us veterans that have transitioned out to really start opening the eyes of those that are still in uniform that can affect change to change that. So that's one piece. And what I'll just tell you is you want to fix recruiting, you have to fix transition. And giving folks the time and space that they need to figure it out, giving them the support that they need to do that is going to lead to better outcomes for service members. And that is going to lead to, those veterans being cheerleaders. But the inverse is we have folks that transition out of the military and they don't have a great experience. What we do is we create recruiting insurgents that are working against the recruiter. We create these parents that are these former service members that are parents, and when their kids turn 17 years old, and I experienced this countless times towards the tail end of my career, they don't want their kids to go through that same type of trauma that they went through, even though they understand the perks that come with service, even though they had a pretty good experience while they were in. It's that transition time of trying to get your feet running again and moving in a positive direction and finding your purpose beyond that time that prevents them from wanting to give consent. And that is kind of the bad thing that exists, where I think it's not necessarily the recruiters. They're doing their job. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I stayed at a recruiting station level at the lowest level that you could my entire career. And so I will never, ever say that recruiters aren't working hard enough, because they absolutely are. Those poor Marine sailors, airmen and guardians are generally working 6 to 7, days a week. They're working typically 10 to sometimes 16 hours a day. And they might complain and they might, moan about what they have to do, but they're doing it every single day. And they're not necessarily doing it for themselves and their own benefit. They are fighting for the people that are on their individual teams. So those recruiters, if you're wearing a uniform out there slinging lead and carrying around your schedule and results book and making contact with high school kids, hey, good on you, especially dealing with the other barriers that you guys have that I didn't have to deal with. And there's this whole thing, Adam, it's called MHS Genesis, that makes it very, very difficult. It was sold as something to improve the recruiter's quality of life. It's been nothing but a terror for a lot of these recruiters. And I'll tell you right now, those guys are improvising, adapting, overcoming every single day to protect our national security, make that mission. So my beef is not with the recruiters. It's not with those that work within recruiting commands that are in service. My big beef here is that we are not doing a good enough job of launching good examples into the uniform or into the universe post their time in uniform. We're not doing anything to take care of those folks, and we're making it harder on those recruiters. Where I think the other failure that becomes or that comes into play is really in our retention of people, right? Just the way that we lead human beings while they're in service. And again, experiences are going to vary based on who's there at the helm and the experiences that they've had, but it's not an all-out effort to try and retain and inspire folks to continue in uniform. And that's where we're kind of losing some of this WASTA and losing a little bit of our momentum, is that it should be everybody in that branch with a focus on growing, developing, retaining the best talent by continuing to challenge and invest those service members and not turning their backs on them while they're in. And unfortunately, as we kind of described at the front end of this, when you decide that this is not for you anymore, when you decide you don't want to play or you can't play, you're written off and thrown off into the island. And that is only hurting that veteran population. It's only hurting our recruiters on the front end. So this is going to be kind of a collaborative approach, right, that has to be taken to fix it. And I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but I can tell you this much. I've got a lot of the good ones that I know that if we're implemented at the right junctures, and I'll showcase one, we'll save this conversation for next week. But programs like SkillBridge are so important for transition. They're so important for recruiting, but individual commanders can't see the forest through the trees. And I'm telling you that if there was an incentive out there for service members to extend their service or sign longer contracts with the ability to have 6 months to participate in a SkillBridge program, whoa, wouldn't that be a win for the world? Wouldn't that be a win for the service, because you'd have more time to inspire and generate that next generation of soldier, airman, Marine to stick around? Wouldn't that be inspirational for people to actually go out there and win and have the time to prepare for transition? And everybody could win across the board. But the reality is we don't do that. We're so adverse to giving up our talent. We're so adverse to giving people the opportunity to succeed. We're focused on our mission set and our TO and the numbers that we need to retain for readiness, that we're killing ourselves in all directions. And so, yeah, that's my long way around the situation there, Adam. This is a problem that is going to require kind of outside input to those that are in position of leadership to wake them up, because none of them have transitioned. They don't know what to expect. They need to change. And the only way that they need to change is to talk to folks that understand what it is on the other side, and not to the point where you got to take everything and implement it overnight. But the status quo is not good enough. And so just like the hot washes after every single battle that exists there needs to be a hot wash when it comes to this, so you can fix the problem at the root cause.
I'm with you on everything that you just said. And it's painfully obvious now that we're doing this work, having this conversation in particular. It's like a light bulb went off in my head. It's like what we talked about before we started recording, right? The three things that destroy a human being: isolation, exhaustion, and I forgot what you said the third one was. Distraction, right? They're setting us up for failure by putting us into purgatory when we decide we can't compete in the game anymore. And you see this, right? It's this cycle, right? So if they would lift us up when we've decided we can't, or physically we can't do this job anymore, instead of putting us into purgatory, they would do the things that make us flourish on the other side of transition. You would see that swing back around, just like Matt's graphic, to better recruiting numbers, happier soldiers, longer serving soldiers, because I'm willing to bet the amount of time people are spending in the military is going down as well. I'm almost willing to guarantee that. And
yeah, when they go to retirement at 100%, that was the straw that broke that back. You don't see the 20-year guys anymore. It's a hybridization model now. So
yeah, and I mean,
why would you? Why would you? I mean, that's the thing is if folks are not 100% invested into service, what is the benefit to going a 20-year career when you can get the same benefits at 4 years, right? There is no incentive to go beyond that. And, really cool that you're going to increase pay, but you can go manage a Chick-fil-A and make more money than what you do in service, and have a whole lot less stress. And, not saying that that's any better, because I think service is the most honorable thing that folks can do. But when you take away, the true carrot, and we start handing out the gold watch of GI Bills and telling folks like, hey, you can go to college and you can get an education. Well, you could do the same thing at Starbucks. So this is going to take outside opinions, kind of collaborating with those that are in positions of leadership to come up with a solution, and to come up with some ideas that make life better for the individual service member.
Well, I mean, and to me, we've talked about this. One of the biggest key takeaways of this today, part 2 for me, is really there are several people like you, like me, and like Matt that are out here willing to make change from our perspective with our lived experience. We just need those people that have the power to bring us on board and let us make those changes. Take our opinions, pick our brains, listen to what we have to say, because I'm willing to bet that we're not the only 3, obviously, that are doing this. We're probably the loudest 3 about it at this point in time, at least in my circle. And I know there's others out there being loud about the transition, just, not having conversations like this. And so, you could put out a message at the DoD level. Hey, we want serious veterans who want to make change in this this space within our military system. And I bet you so many, because I get asked on a regular basis, right? Like, I want to help the veterans, but how do I do that? Right. Well, if you're a veteran and you've got transition experience and it didn't go well for you, you can do that by making noise and have these conversations. Well, if DoD would put out something or stand up a department to take a look and audit these things and actually fix them, I bet you would have 1 million volunteers come out of the woodwork to fix it. So that, because I try to believe in the best in everybody. And I think our brothers and sisters largely don't want others going through the same things that we had to go through. And I know you don't think that you had a rough transition, but clearly you understand this, and something was rough in your transition, or else you wouldn't be doing this work. And I got to believe everybody else is the same way. I work out at Crunch Fitness here. One of the best trainers I see there is a Marine, and I asked him about his transition and if he would come on the podcast. And he's like, is this what you do? I was like, yeah, dude. He's like, good for you, because I couldn't figure out a way to make it better, but you're making noise, and that's where it starts. And so, we're not alone in this. We all pretty much experience shitty transitions, and there's more than enough of us willing to step up and make the change.
A quarter million a year leave service. And the other piece to this, Adam, is there are some people out there that have figured this thing out, and they are thriving. And those should be some of the loudest voices out there, are those that are thriving, and those that are, really crushing it outside of their time in service. And just going to go back to one point, like the way that you destroy a human being. I got to say it, Adam, because we talked about this, right? And so here's the recipe for everybody that might still be tuning in to this point. If you want to destroy a human being, I'm going to give you the recipe right now. You do 3 things to them if you want to destroy their lives. You isolate them, you distract them, and you exhaust them. And so let's think about what transition really is for a lot of service members at the end of their contract. You're probably pretty wore out. You're probably pretty exhausted at the conclusion of that 4 years or that 30-year career that you have, because you've given everything in service to something that was more than just yourself. Now, the isolation piece, you're going to transition on your own. And that's something that you may think everybody knows, and it's at the forefront of their brain, but it is not driven home to the degree that it needs to be for service members that are getting ready to retire or separate. You're going to do this on your own. And it will be something that if you don't have a tight tribe around you, it's going to be super, super, lonely. And you're not going to have those people that you've leaned on time and time again over the course of your 4 or 30-year career. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to distract you, and we're going to distract you with opportunities that are out there. We're going to distract you by not understanding the circumstances, feelings, and goals that you have for yourself and not clearly defining what success looks like in transition. And, that right there is the recipe to destroy a human being. And so what do you do to do that? Well, you really got to do the inverse of those things. You have to, instead of exhaust them, you have to find a way to rest them. You need to find a way to connect them, right? So rested, connected, and just restored is what you need, and focused, restored and focused, and kind of finding purpose. So now I'm going to do like a shameless plug, if that's okay, Adam.
Yes,
I don't like to do shameless plugs.
I was going to bring it up if you didn't, because
so here's the shameless plug. One of the ventures that I'm involved with right now is working with an organization that has a training program that was designed originally for those that were in business to have a better balanced life and just find purpose outside of their work and to kind of live well-rounded. In essence, I've been brought on to take this training and tailor it to the military community. So we had a generous donor that is going to afford 100 active duty veteran supporters through this inaugural training that's going to go next Wednesday. It's going to go next Wednesday for about 2 full weeks. There is no ask, except that if you are one of those types of people and you're willing to provide, feedback to the training, that we can take that to adjust, because that's what this transition game is. It's finding a way to keeping your feet moving forward. It's finding your purpose beyond the time in uniform. It's finding your way to have a more well-rounded life. So for those that are out there, if you hop on my LinkedIn page, there's a post that went out on Monday. If you're interested, drop a scholarship application in there, and we'll try to get you guys through, because look, that's the one thing that I can do outside of running my suck hole, is finding a way to give back and to do better. And so that's just my that's my give back, and really what was agreed to is bringing me on as part of that team. So sorry for the shameless plug. That's weird, but check the post out, drop an application. Love to work with anybody out there that wants to be part of the change.
That's okay. We're going to plug it again. I'll also put that link so you don't have to comb through his post to find it. I'll put it in my community, the Stronghold free community. Come join it. Be with 65 other veterans who are in transition right now. We're all here to build each other up. The antithesis of Facebook groups. So you can also find that resource in my community. Unless we have anything else, fellas, Matt, will you be joining us next week for the leadership piece?
Only if you guys want me there. I really appreciate the time to kind of talk about what I talked about. I may have ran out of steam during this talk. I don't know. We'll see. But you guys can talk amongst yourself, and you invite me if you'd like. How's that sound?
I think we're going to invite you, and I think next week, to kind of just showcase what we're going to spend our effort towards, is we're going to talk a little bit about SkillBridge, and we're going to talk specifically around leadership's thoughts on SkillBridge, what's going to affect that, and then what leaders that are still wearing the uniform can do to provide better outcomes for the service members that they serve. And then also put in perspective for those service members the hard truths that I learned not until I was out of uniform and was no longer in a position to affect things. So I think the hope is next week is to shed a little bit of light on that and give some insights to those that really need it, that can affect change now, because it's going to take those that are still wearing the uniform to inspire this change. It's not going to be these crusty old red hatters that tell their war stories. We're just a small part of it, exercising our First Amendment rights here. So that's what we got here.
Hey, come at me, bro, if you don't like what we're talking about. That means it's working. So fuck you. And I'm going to keep making noise, and nobody's going to stop me. You don't scare me. To those of you who tuned in live, thank you so very much. It means the world to me, Thomas and Matt. I know this is important work, and this is the beginning. There's a lot more of this to come, probably from the three of us in cahoots in the future. I can almost guarantee you that. Please be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 1500 Eastern Time for the Hidden Bridge Part 3, where we're going to cover everything that Thomas just talked about. And it's probably going to get a little dark, and we're going to have some feelings on leadership, because I'm finding some things that I'm not really happy about that need to be addressed. So it'll be a good one. Lots more information. And again, you're not going to find these conversations anywhere else except for my YouTube channel, because no other veteran has in my opinion, the balls to have these conversations. So I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep making noise until somebody at the DoD level with power can help me make a change or ask my opinion on how to change, at which time I'll reach out to all the people that are smarter than me that have better ideas, because I'm like Thomas and Matt, I don't have all the answers, but I know making noise will get us somewhere. So fellas, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you doing this with me and, believing in my mission to bring awareness to the transition and just to help our brothers and sisters, because Thomas has said it 3, 4, 5 times in this episode. It's collaboration between our community that is going to make this change. And this is the beginning of that. So I appreciate you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Adam.
Likewise, Adam. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We'll see you guys next Wednesday. Everybody take care. Thank you for tuning in.